Because they're making this grassroots discussion possible. And I decided for a second straight year to reject sitting through a Trump program, because when you're done with the fantasies, when you're done with the exaggerations, when you've heard all the untruths, you're still not getting anything that resembles our state. And our state appreciates, since we're the best state in the union, a real discussion. And I've had more than 1,100 open-to-all town hall meetings. Senator Merkley has done the same. And it's going to be great to listen to folks tonight. And obviously, there's no shortage of big issues. People know that they're getting mugged when they go to a grocery counter. They're seeing their constitutional liberties get stomped on. And we're going to talk about all those issues, but I thought I'd start with some good news, given the Supreme Court development striking down the tariffs that Trump slapped on products that all of you buy from other countries. And the watchdog role you're going to hear a lot about tonight is absolutely essential, because number one, I'm going to continue to build support in the Senate for our 51-47 win to get rid of Trump's tariffs. Yesterday, I proposed to return to small Oregon businesses the money that Donald Trump took from them. And especially important is that Senator Merkley and I are working for Congress to reassert the constitutional mandate over trade. Now, there's a lot of watchdogging that we're going to talk about tonight, and it's bringing results. Results like beating back the Trump scheme to oppose an airport Alcatraz at Newport on the Oregon coast, or rejecting the militarization of our streets by showing all over America that protests in Portland and elsewhere have been overwhelmingly peaceful expressions of the First Amendment. So when you hear about around the country the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth and 10th Amendment getting stomped on, know that we in Oregon believe those are sacred rights, and we're going to work closely with all of you to champion them. I called ICE on the Senate floor that in many instances is Trump's personal Gestapo. And you don't hope a Gestapo reforms itself. You don't tweak a Gestapo. What you do is stop it by denying it a single additional dollar. So there's a lot of watchdogging to go forward today. We're looking forward to hearing your questions, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. And with that, in the lingo of the United States Senate, let me yield to my friend, Senator Merkley.
Thank you so much, Ron. And together, we are really pleased to be presenting the fate of the union. Our broadcast to say, here's what's going on in summary, and then listen to your questions about the challenges we're facing. If President Trump was speaking with integrity tonight, he would start off by saying, over the last year, I've made billionaires richer and everyone else sicker and poorer, because that kind of sums it up. He'd also be saying, and by the way, I spent this last year systematically undermining our democratic republic, undermining the checks and balances of our Constitution. He would and could, quite honestly, brag about the fact that he has made great progress in establishing an authoritarian state, ignoring laws, ignoring the Constitution, running over people's civil rights, and all of that happening in a manner that we have never seen in America before. So we have a lot of challenges to fight Trump's vision of America. In his vision, it's families lose and billionaires win, government by and for the powerful. But in our vision, it's families thrive, and the affluent, they pay their fair share. We fight for the foundations for families to thrive: healthcare, housing, education, and good paying jobs. So we're delighted to be here tonight. to speak honestly about where things are and where things need to go, and to hear your questions and your thoughts.
Nathan, let's hear from Oregon.
Terrific. We have a great lineup of Oregonians from around the state with questions for both of you, so thanks for joining. First up, we have Gwen from Deschutes County. Gwen, go right ahead.
Hello, and thank you for in the introduction mentioning the tariffs. I think I need a little civics lesson, and I'm hoping you guys can help. So is the Trump administration move to enact new global tariffs just days after a Supreme Court defeat a legitimate use of executive power or a direct defiance of the judiciary? And what are the potential consequences?
Well, first of all, we are going to fight him every step of the way. That's why I mentioned one of the next steps can go back to the Senate floor, where we won on my proposal 51 to 47 to strike them down. I think the Supreme Court has made it very clear that they are hostile to this idea. We are going to fight every single day in opposition to Trump's new approach. And the reality is, we said at town hall meetings that we thought we were going to win at the Supreme Court level, but even though we did win, Trump is going to come back every single day with another tariff approach, because the tariffs give him a chance to act like a bully. That's what he really likes to do, to single people out and say, hey, you know, you may want to keep that such and such business. Well, if you don't help me, I'm going to stock you up with extra tariffs. And we're going to fight this. It's going to be a tough fight. It will be a fight every single day Donald Trump is in office. I think if he had his way, he would be interested in getting rid of the tax code and just having tariffs.
And I think our plan is to have each of us answer a question and then go on to the next person, get the maximum number of questions in. So I just say yes to everything that Ron just said.
Terrific. Well, you are both invited to answer each question if you have anything else to add. So next up, we have Candace and Greg from Tillamook County.
Good afternoon, Senators. My question is, or our question is, if the president decides to attack Iran, what powers can Congress be put in place to prevent such military action?
Well, thank you so much, Candace and Greg, for the question about Iran. And it really brings to light what our Constitution did in allocating powers to Congress. And Ron was just talking about the tariff power, which is a taxation power. That's allocated in the Constitution to Congress. And the ability to declare war, the issues of war and peace, those are also explicitly given to Congress in the Constitution. In fact, our founders said, we can't really trust a single person in the executive office to make decisions about war and peace, because they might have motivations that are not in the overall interest of the nation. And that is why they said it needs to be a collective decision. After all, if we think about the last Iraq war and Afghanistan, you saw well over 5,000 Americans die. You saw many times that seriously injured. You saw trillions of dollars spent. So this is why the decision needs to be rested with the debate in Congress. Now, the president, he feels comfortable ignoring what the Constitution says, whether it's on taxation, whether it's on the power of the purse, certainly on the powers of war. But we have an instrument to bring to bear called the War Powers Act, in which we can force a vote of Congress to say, no, you have to stop and desist unless you can get approval from Congress, and that approval is called an authorization for the use of military force, or an AUMF. So we will absolutely use every tool the Constitution gives us and the law gives us to insist to rein in President Trump. We should recognize wars are easily started, they're hard to end, and they're absolutely devastating in blood and in treasure.
I very much agree with so many of the points Senator Merkley made, and I'm going to be personal just for a moment. I was one of a very small number of United States senators who voted against going to war in Iraq, and it was a very difficult vote, and it came off as a very heated debate. And in fact, if you want to know a historical parallel, George W. Bush came to the United States Senate and said, we're going to have a debate on this. We're going to be held accountable, starting with me. It'd be nice to be able to have a president where we can imagine doing that again.
Terrific. Thank you both. Next up, we have Jen from Lane County.
Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you so much for hosting us. I wanted to address this question to both of you. So like a lot of people my age, I grew up watching Schoolhouse Rock. And in addition to learning a lot about adverbs, I also got a pretty good education on the Constitution, on our government and separation of powers and all of that. It's been pretty appalling to watch Trump usurping those Article I powers in just numerous unprecedented ways over the last year, taking away your oversight on taxation, on spending, leveraging military action in inappropriate ways. I obviously could go on, and I won't for the sake of time, but I would really like to hear from both of you to be as specific as you can be on what your plan is to take that power back, to re-engage that oversight and have some determination on how my tax dollars, all our tax dollars are spent, instead of just having this roughshod unilateral power that is just really distressing.
Well, I'll jump in first as a member of the spending committee called the Appropriations Committee. And this power of the purse issue is huge because that is the vision that distinguishes a democratic republic from a strongman state. In a democratic republic, the representatives from all corners of the country come together and they say, here are the programs and here's how much money we're going to give. And then the executive executes those programs. In a strongman state, you hear things like, oh, I'm canceling that program because it's not in alignment with my administration's priorities. And you've heard that line so many times from President Trump, and every time he says it and cancels a program that has been authorized and funded in law, he is violating both the law and the Constitution. One of the things we did this year is we did pass 11 of the 12 spending bills. That's helpful rather than the continuing resolution we had in 2025. Second, we took a lot of things that were in report language, which does not have force of law, and we put it actually into the bills themselves. Now, I, in addition, put up as an amendment time and time again a ban on the president coming back to Congress at the end of the year with something that we'd never heard of before called a pocket rescission. And it was basically, look, if I can slow walk a program to the end of the year and then ask Congress to cancel it, even without Congress voting, the program will run into the end of the year and die. And I was sure the Supreme Court would say, well, you can't do that. The law says that any program, in order for it to be undone, it has to be an affirmative vote of the House and affirmative vote of the Senate. But the Supreme Court is part of the problem. They proceeded to say, you know what? We're going to let the president have this form of line item veto. So that remains a real problem with the Supreme Court proceeding in Trump versus United States to say the president is above the law. You combine that with pardon power and the whole executive branch feels above the law. And then in this case, saying that the president can kill a program by slow walking it to the end of the year. So we are trying to undo that and get bipartisan support to reclaim the power of the purse. But every Democrat has supported to reclaim the power of the purse. And every Republican has voted to not reclaim the power of the purse. So we're going to need some bipartisan cooperation in order to honor the constitutional vision and the importance of programs and funding being done by Congress, not by the president.
The power of the purse is really the ball game in terms of Congress taking back its role. And for example, one of the most important issues in Oregon with respect to the purse is the price of prescription medicine. And along with my colleagues, we've laid out a 4-point proposal already to start going after the Trump ripoffs. He's set up his own Trump RX And I think most of that money is going to go into the pockets of his kids. And we have been doing investigations at the Finance Committee. We're leading the Epstein investigation right now. And the power of the purse is really the key to having that power that you're talking about.
Terrific. Next up, we have Eddie from Malheur County.
Thank you all so much for having me. Eddie Melendrez, here in Malheur County, Ontario, Oregon specifically. I use he, him pronouns, and I appreciate y'all having me. I have a couple questions I'd like to ask, regarding the work I'm doing as a community organizer for the Oregon Food Bank, supporting folks with not more than just food, but the root causes of why folks are going hungry. But the first question that I have for you all, both, or if you could answer, would be, what are you doing to restore the SNAP to all citizens without restrictions? In Malheur County, it's close to 70% of community members rely on SNAP and Medicaid. So I can't imagine the rippling effect that is going to have on our community, from the stores that are going to lose, they're going to lose resources and money, and maybe eventually having to lay off staff. The second question that I have is the climate impacts that our communities are having here, and especially our immigrant community members here in Malheur County, with the fires getting stronger and more fierce, and the summers getting hotter and longer, and the smoke hazards that we're having in the communities. I've seen that some of our most vulnerable community members, such as our immigrant community members, don't have any safety protections. And so what are you doing around that, around climate protections? The other question I have is protecting our undocumented community members. How can we, with the increase in attacks on these community members, what are you doing specifically to support these community members? Locally, we created a rapid response team working with the Portland Immigrant Rights Coalition and ECHO, Equity Corps of Oregon, and the Oregon Sanctuary Promise Hotline, to try to document and to report any suspected ICE activity in Oregon. But what are you all doing at the federal level? And then thank you all for your time. But the last question would be, providing basic benefits for seasonal firefighters for the Bureau of Land Management and contractors. I see that there's Republican representatives doing work at the federal level to expand some of these protections and some of these benefits, especially for the contractors that are doing this work. I think that there's Senator Daines and Representative Westerman that are also doing this work. So I might have brought this question up in the past, but what are you all doing to protect our some of our most essential wildland firefighters, especially those that are contracting with the BLM as well? But with that, I yield my time, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing at the state level to combat this authoritarianistic government, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
So jumping in, you have a lot of topics there, so I'm going to try to be brief on each one, and I want to make sure we give other folks a chance to ask questions. SNAP, you're absolutely right. The what Trump called his big beautiful bill, and we called the big ugly betrayal, proceeded to savage nutrition programs, SNAP programs. It's going to create a lot of new, basically red tape. I mean, the whole approach of his bill was the red carpet for the rich and red tape for struggling families. And that's both in nutrition and in Medicaid. So we're going to try to reverse that. We don't think the idea of undermining nutrition and health care in order to give tax breaks to billionaires is a great plan. That is the families lose, billionaires win vision, not the families thrive vision. On the workers in the fields, I've introduced bills that basically lay out protections for workers from heat and smoke, because we're seeing both of them much more common, and our laws are insufficient to protect workers currently in the fields. And that includes provision of water and ability to not be forced to work in any setting that is a risk to your health because of extreme heat and smoke. Turning to the issue that you have for seasonal firefighters, what we're trying to do is enable firefighters to have year-round work. So when they're not working fighting fires, they can work in forest management, in prescribed burns, in thinning, in mowing, because we need those capable folks to be able to retain their skills and not lose them every single cycle. And that also involves having to pay more. And Senator Feinstein, now no longer with us now, but she really helped drive this much higher pay for our federal firefighters, and the states working in terms of that challenge for state workers. But there are a lot of firefighters who like to work the firefighter season and then go and do something quite different. But for those who want to work year-round so we can retain their skills, we want to enable them to do so.
The issue that you talked about with respect to fire has really come front and center with respect to what are going to be the approaches and the technologies that are going to make a big difference. And I've led the effort in the Resources Committee to expand these prescribed burns. And the reality is that Native American tribes deserve enormous credit for coming up with this idea. And if you go in there when it's the colder weather months and you deal with the overstocked timber stands, you can stop some of these infernos that hit Oregon in the summer. So I think that's a big part of it. With respect to climate, I wrote the clean energy tax credits that I continue to believe are still going to be the big hope, where you say the more that somebody reduces carbon, the bigger their tax savings. And even though the Trump people have rolled some of that back, I proposed a new version of it. I think we ought to get on with it because it's a way to take voluntary incentives. Nobody is required to do anything, but to make sure that there are actual rewards for doing the kind of work you just described about in climate.
You did mention undocumented workers, and I want to note that we have really pushed for comprehensive immigration reform that would include a pathway to citizenship. The Senate passed that in 2013 with a majority support, help from both parties together. We had a deal to pursue that in 2024. Then candidate Trump torpedoed it. So we've got to return to the basic common sense of tackling a whole series of the immigration issues together, including a pathway to citizenship. And I think that we may have somebody else, I imagine, ask a question about ICE, but we would have a lot to say about that.
I want to pick up where Senator Merkley just went, because the other thing we've got to do on immigration, and particularly as it relates to the future, is to get Trump back on what he said he was going to do. He didn't talk about taking young people off the streets or priests or the like. He said he was going to go after cartels and murderers and drug networks and the like. And we've got to get an approach on immigration that goes back to what Donald Trump said he was going to do in 2024 and hasn't come close to even trying.
Terrific. And thanks for the question, Eddie. Next up, we have Pam from Multnomah County.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I wanted to ask, first of all, the people who were shot in their car by ICE a few weeks ago near Emmanuel Hospital, I wanted to know how they were doing, also what their legal status was. And just as an aside, I thought of, it's not in my thing, but I had a friend, Larry Ackerley, who passed away this weekend. He was a firefighter on the wildfires for many years, and he died of lung cancer. And I just wanted to let you guys know that he was a great guy. That's it. That's it. I really want to know the status of the people who were shot by ICE, if they're in ICE custody, and how they're doing.
Yes, so the driver, Luis Nino Moncada, he was shot through the arm. He is in ICE custody or somewhere in that or Customs and Border Protection, somewhere in that world. And the woman who was the passenger, Yorlenis Zambrano Contreras, she was shot through the chest. Obviously a more serious injury, but she has recovered as well. She is out on her own cognizance, but has a court date scheduled related to her I guess you would say, to her documentation. So both are out of the hospital, one detained.
And I believe that our Attorney General Mr. Rayfield is looking into some of the circumstances to surround the shooting, and what Senator Merkley has described is what we know.
You know, they've said that the driver weaponized their vehicle, but that was exactly what we heard in Minnesota. Immediately, well, the driver was attacking our agents. We know from the videos in Minnesota that was not true. We don't have videos like that for what happened outside of the Seventh-day Adventist hospital. But I must say what we've learned is we cannot trust the administration to fairly describe what took place.
Well, I had heard that at first ICE denied any responsibility in the thing at all. At first they lied and said they weren't even there.
Yeah, that's why the Rayfield inquiry is so important. That's what we were told too.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Pam. Next up, we have Patty from Washington County.
Good evening, Senators. Thanks for being here. I'm Patty Falkenstein, a care provider from Tigard, and Katina says hi. Daffodils are blooming here in Tigard, and I'm sorry that you're in the middle of a snowstorm. My question, I guess, by the way, Senator Wyden, you mentioned a lot of amendments. The amendment I'm most interested in right this minute is the 25th. But I'm interested in the financial doings of the Epstein organization. When will we have some names and some specifics about who was spending money and what it went for, and the adoption agency and all of the horribleness that's going on there?
I have been at this investigation through a follow the money approach since 2022, and I want Oregonians to know, and Senator Merkley has been very involved in this as well. I'm going to stay at it until all the facts come out. It's not blue, it's not red, and I'm going to push for major reforms, because the real scandal here is that the banks for years and years looked the other way. And there are something called SARs, suspicious activity reports, that they should have dealt with. And the reality is that lots of Oregonians, we hear this at our town hall meetings, use this as an example of the country's economy being rigged. And at every step, my investigators come up with a new issue. Just last night, CBS talked about our work and the work of others to look at some new evidence suggests that Mr. Epstein was also involved in drug activity, not just sex trafficking. So I want people to know I'm going to stay with it. I do not think Pam Bondi's approach is going to get this done. You know, consistently at every step of the way, she bobbed and weaved. She started off saying, look at my desk. There's all this about Epstein on my desk, and what turned out is it was nothing. And so we're going to stay at it, and I want everybody to know that I have thought this was one of the most important investigations I've seen in a long time, because it speaks to the integrity of the entire American government.
You know, there were two major troves of information, and the two of us have led each on one part of that. On the actual files, I carried the Epstein bill on the floor of the Senate. It was initially, tabled by a unanimous Republican vote. But then, after the House acted with a discharge petition, we were able to get unanimous consent to pass that bill. And that's what led to the release of the 3 million pages. Now recognize this, the 3 million pages are only a portion of the files that are supposed to be released. It's said that there are another 3 million pages. Plus, what was released was heavily redacted. And in fact, things that were redacted were often redacted to protect the perpetrators, but they didn't redact, as they were required by the law to do, all of the names or images related to the victims. And so a lot of the victims were re-victimized by how Pam Bondi released those files. But the second set of files is what runs leading on with that $1.5 billion suspicious activity report. So he's going to be leading the charge on Epstein 2.0 And we're going to keep pressing because this is about powerful men, super rich elite, feeling that they can groom and abuse and rape boys and girls and young men or under 18 men and women, and do it with no accountability. And so we are going to keep pushing till we have transparency for the public and accountability and for the perpetrators, and the closest thing we can get to justice for the victims.
Terrific.
Can we also make a point about the care question that we heard? You know, some of the things that the Trump people have done to seniors and nursing homes and the like. They've opposed minimum standards with respect to nursing home care, minimum standards to take care of older people in their 80s and 90s. And at his confirmation hearing before the Finance Committee, Mehmet Oz said, well, we don't need these nursing home standards because algorithms are going to take care of things for seniors. And I looked at him and I said, are you kidding me? Are you really kidding me that algorithms are going to take care of things, that an 85-year-old woman who needs to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night is going to have her care determined by an algorithm? Let's get real. And they're doing this throughout the senior care system.
Great. Well, thanks for the question, Patty. Next up, we have Jean from Jackson County.
Where is the money that was stolen by Doge? How is it being used now? What's being done about it?
My investigators, the Finance Committee investigators, are digging into exactly this question. I blew the whistle initially, but there's a lot to really dig into. As you know, Musk made this a big deal and then he vanished. So you'll hear some more about this. If you give us a call, we'll get you a copy of the legislation that we've already used as the framework, because this is outrageous. What's going on with Doge, this was a centerpiece of the Trump-Musk operation, and everything we have seen is that they looked for ways, for example, to weaponize the information and take advantage of people, and we're going to stay at it until we root it out.
Terrific. Well, thank you for the question, Jean. Next up, we have Priscilla from Crook County.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for hosting this town hall. I guess it's evening where you are. It's still afternoon here in Oregon. Many of us have obviously this evening talked about the tariff issue, and we have concerns about this. Originally, I was going to ask what Congress could do about it, but you kind of addressed that early on. So instead, what I'd like to ask about or comment on is I read in the paper that the tariffs that the president has imposed have not balanced the trade, but have actually made it worse. And with the Supreme Court's decision, and where he supposedly has to quit collecting tariffs, there's a bunch of people wondering what's going to happen to the money that has been collected. Should it, in your opinion, go to the companies who pass that?
It ought to go to hard-hit taxpayers and small businesses. And yesterday, I introduced with two other senators. I'm the ranking point person on taxes, and Jean Shaheen, Ed Markey for other areas of the budget. And we have said we are going to use the Small Business Administration, because they have expertise in small businesses, as the place that we're going to focus on to get the money refunded to these people who are really vulnerable. It's not going to go to people who've ripped off the Treasury as well. We've seen Trump with, for example, crypto, give all these breaks to big guys and himself. We wrote this draft bill that we proposed yesterday that is already out through my office to make the focus small businesses and taxpayers of modest means run through the SBA.
Those terrorists have, as you said, actually increased the differential between what we bring in goods and what we export. The trade imbalance has gotten larger, and we've lost 100,000 manufacturing jobs. And a big piece of that is the chaotic nature. I mean, modest tariffs on very low-income countries can help build jobs in the United States, make our factories more competitive. But what we are seeing instead is chaos. Today, I don't like what's going on in Brazil. I'll give them a 50% tariff. Today, I'll show China, and I'll give them a 100% tariff. And all of those shenanigans created chaos for our manufacturers and often drove up the cost of the components that go into our exported product. And in the ag world, tremendous angst over, well, how do we know what to plant when we don't know what the rules are going to be by the time the crops are harvested? And also a lot of worry about retaliatory tariffs, because realize that this whole situation is one in which there are two players. It's not as if you can just do something and nobody else reacts. And so it's been chaos. It's been unconstitutional, as the court has now declared. Trump has turned to this additional power under the 1974 Trade Act for 150 days to address an imbalance of payments. At that point, we are going to see what happens. But your point about where's this money going? Well, there's a whole bunch of slush funds being built up in the Trump administration where he's harvesting money, and we don't know exactly where it's going. And that's why the work that Ron's team is doing is so important, because we have to restore the power of the purse and accountability. And that includes this fund, this international fund, in which payments were made for the oil, and we can have a whole nother discussion about Venezuela, in which it's under control of the administration with no guidance from Congress. It's just absolutely unacceptable.
One of the biggest challenges is Donald Trump refuses to get any enforcement on these tariff deals. And you see this particularly with China, which is so important to Oregon. We have, of course, a geographical advantage in our location, and Trump just will not do any enforcement. When it comes to enforcement, there is no there, and that encourages exactly what Jeff's talking about.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Priscilla. So we have gotten over 1,000 folks submitting to join this town hall, and that's not including all the YouTube comments. And we are doing our best to curate a good range of topics. We at People's Town Hall don't ask your party registration, who you voted for, if you even voted. But I did want to get to a few subjects that were really popular that we weren't able to get to with folks invited here. Senators, I don't need to tell you how much pride Oregonians take in vote by mail. And we had, overwhelming number of questions about the SAVE Act and concerns about how that would affect Oregonians if it is passed. Do you have some perspective to offer?
Yeah, the SAVE Act is a horrible piece of legislation that would turn back the clock in terms of voting progress and be particularly horrible for women in terms of their being able to register for the vote and all of the extra hurdles and barriers that have been placed there. Also, what we know is the real end game is to get rid of vote by mail. That's what Trump wants to do. In fact, Oregonians remember that Vladimir Putin actually told him when they were going to a discussion of another topic, he ought to get rid of vote by mail. So we expect to have to fight every single day, every day. Senator Merkley and I are two United States senators to watchdog every possibility for manipulating the system. We had our official Tobias Reed, for example, deal responsibly with some of the requests for data, but it's going to be something every single day because Donald Trump is going to try to tilt the election in his favor. He thinks that gutting the protections that Oregon and others have come up with is the way to do it, and we're going to fight him every day.
Well, I've got to echo everything Ron said and add a little to it because this is so important. When Trump is intent on undermining our democratic republic and replacing it with a strongman state, the most dangerous piece of that effort is the manipulation of next November's election. And he's doing mid-decade redistricting to try to gerrymander more Republican districts or Republican members into the House of Representatives. He's attacking vote by mail by eliminating the day, postmark, the day a letter is dropped off, to try to make that more complicated. He is pressing for a national voter registration database so he can purge voters off, and we'll go to the polls and we won't know that we're not registered to vote until we get there, because it doesn't even require notification of people who have been purged. This is where Oregon said, no, we're not giving you our voter database, and we took it to court, and I'm very pleased that our Secretary of State and our Attorney General really fought and won this battle. But what is happening in the SAVE Act is a requirement to push for everyone to have to submit their voter registration database. And realize all of this is about rigging the next election. One piece on vote by mail to make it harder is it says you have to enclose a copy of your ID when you send your vote by mail letter back in. And that's all about making it very difficult. They want people to vote on election day because they can manipulate election day. They can move the precincts. They can put them where there's no parking. They can have the machines not work or the people not work. They can put out false information about the date and false information about the place. All these are tried and true manipulations on election day. Vote by mail is a high integrity system that stops all those shenanigans, and that's why Trump's trying to kill it. And in addition, they put in restrictions about the ability to basically do voter registration on campuses. So they're attacking the demographics that tend to vote a little bit more blue. That includes women, and as pointed out, their married name won't match their birth certificate, so they have to re-register and go through all kinds of effort to actually get to vote again. Students, it includes people in inner city, includes people who vote by mail. It's all about rigging the election. It's part of the just wholesale attack on the heart of our constitutional system, the ballot box. And Ron and I are going to fight it like hell, do everything we can to stop this effort to rig and the next election in the broader effort to create that strongman state.
And there's some interesting history here as well, Nathan. The late Dennis Richardson from Southern Oregon used to tell me he was one of the most conservative people around. He basically defended at every opportunity our vote by mail system, and basically before he passed, he really told Donald Trump he was all wrong in terms of his opposition to vote by mail, and that he, as a conservative and as Secretary of State, had done everything he could to protect it, and he was giving an assurance to the president.
Terrific. Along similar lines, and you touched on this a little bit, we got a question from James in Lane County about even if the SAVE Act doesn't become law, the Postmaster General delaying postmarks, doing other things that could delay vote by mail. Are there things Congress can do to prevent those disruptions?
Sure, we can go to the floor of the United States Senate and try to offer proposals to derail it. We're going to need a grassroots movement to protect American voting. That's what we're going to need between now and the fall, because Donald Trump is every single day looking for ways. Maybe tomorrow will be reapportionment. We've seen everything he's tried to do there. He wasn't very pleased with what the response of some of the court decisions, but every single day, whether it's a postmark or vote by mail or anything else, we're going to have to put our priorities in front of blocking what Trump is doing, and we're prepared. Your senators are prepared to do it, and I hope we've made that clear.
Terrific. Another very common topic we've got was Citizens United, which is not a piece of legislation, but it's had so much impact on our elections. Are there ways folks can be hopeful about less big money in elections going forward, or repealing Citizens United, something along those lines?
We'd like to throw the thing in a garbage can, because basically what this court decision says is that the rich guy's checkbook and the poor guy's soapbox are basically the same thing, and that is just preposterous. Now, we're not going to be able to change that law in the next 15 minutes, but one of the best things we could do is get the Disclose Act passed, because that would give people more information about elections. But one of the reasons that the two of us do all these town hall meetings is because we want people who don't feel they can write big checks to political campaigns to say, we saw our senators, we listened to them, they spent 90 minutes here, they answered our questions, and they're making it clear that money isn't what's moving them, that we're listening to people, and that's why we do it.
You know, we have two campaign systems in America. One for ordinary Americans, in which you write a check or you make a donation, a credit card to your candidate you like. It's disclosed and the amount is capped, the amount is limited. And then there's a system for the mega rich, and that's the Citizens United system. And it says, and this is what the Supreme Court ruled, they said if you give the money to a friend of the candidate, you can give unlimited sums and you can give it secretly. So it's referred to as dark money. And that's where the Disclose Act comes in. But even if it's disclosed, it's still massively corruptive in our system. In fact, a lot of these big donors want people to know that they donated all this money. The fossil fuel world and the crypto world want people to know they put millions in so that they can basically have more influence by terrifying House and Senate members that if they don't proceed to vote in the direction that those big, powerful lobbies want, that they'll be the next victim of the dark money from the crypto world or the fossil world or the big banks or who knows what, all of them. So this is really creating government by and for the powerful. Now, if you remember in the 2024 campaign, Trump was down at Mar-a-Lago and he had the oil executives and he said, you raise me $1 billion and I'll take good care of you. Well, they raised him at least $500 million and he has taken good care of them, derailing renewable energy projects in every possible way, doing massive additional tax breaks for the oil companies and what Trump called his big, beautiful bill. That's corruption, plain and simple. And in order to reform it, because, other than the Disclose Act, in order to get rid of it, we have to reform the court. The Supreme Court has become the instrument of the powerful against our Constitution, against our people, and that they have done that in multiple ways. When they had Trump versus the United States, they said, hey, the president can commit a crime, and it's not a crime as long as he puts a government stamp on it. And then with the fact that you have pardon power for a president, the whole executive branch thinks it's above the law. So here we are with this massive corrupting force in which the Supreme Court has said unlimited sums from the powerful can be done secretly, and it's really creating government by and for the powerful instead of the people. So we've got to reform the Supreme Court in order to rein in this and restore the vision our nation was founded on.
And what's striking, Nathan, is what Jeff just described is the corruption that's deeply embedded in so much of American politics. And I'm just looking at this handout that was given for this evening's program, People's Town Hall. That's the name of your organization. It's not a PAC, it's not a political group, it's a People's Town Hall, and it says all Oregonians have the opportunity to ask questions and share their views. That's what we think ought to be a bigger part of government. We get it. We understand the way politics works today, and we're chipping away every single day at this corrupt system to try to change it.
Well, thanks for the plug, Senator. We've been at this almost an hour, and we have all the digital connections that make this possible. I think I just noticed, Senator Wyden, are you wearing a frog pin on your lapel?
I am wearing a frog, and I want to say just that Senator Merkley and I feel so proud to represent the frogs in Congress, because what they did, and Jeff and I have talked about it often, is they helped Oregon not take the bait from Trump. Trump was trying to provoke us. He kept saying, oh, what a violent place Oregon is and the like. And the frogs, and I helped a little bit with the pumpkins and stuff, sent a message, no, that's not what we're all about. And the day that Trump pulled up stakes and said, I'm getting out, I said, this is a win that to a great extent is the frogs' win, because the frogs said, we're going to be about peaceful approaches. We're going to make fun of everybody. We're going to have a good time. We're going to show America that our instincts are for the good and that we care about everybody and that we have decency that is so essential to public service. So I'm wearing this today. I'm going to be with them in an hour or so. But Jeff and I feel particularly committed to the ethic that the frogs bring of decency and goodness. And when they showed the country that they weren't going to take the Trump bait and get involved in something like we had in Trump 1, we said, those frogs are making us proud.
And I'll tell you, the demonstrations have been with joy and whimsy, and they have absolutely frustrated the Trump administration. We've seen a marriage and the carpet rolled out in front of the ICE building, with crochet classes, salsa dancing classes, the unipiper on a unicycle with his bagpipes, people creating all these ways to say we disagree profoundly, but we're not going to get into physical altercation with the ICE agents because we know that's what Trump wants. He wants to create a riot. And it's taken enormous discipline, and it has absolutely frustrated Team Trump that wanted to create riots. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful chapter. And here in DC, a lot of the light posts have a square base, a rectangular base, and across a number of the posters that I have seen glued onto those bases have been the frogs. They are now a national symbol of resistance to this authoritarian takeover and to the ICE operating as secret police. And if I can say, I never thought I'd see secret police in America. You can read about the secret police, the Savak in Iran, under the Shah of Iran, so many other places, no ID, showing up in unmarked cars, knocking down doors without judicial warrants and grabbing people out of those houses and proceeding to detain them, often preventing them from any contact with a family member or with an attorney. What I've just described, that's what secret police are. And we have them right now. Trump has turned ICE into secret police. They are breaking the law, they are breaking the Constitution, and we are going to fight them every way we can. And that's why we have voted against funding the Department of Homeland Security, because we are trying to use every leverage we can to end these outrageous secret police practices that are going on here in the United States of America.
And when you think about it, the masks, for example, are just a symbol, because everybody else in law enforcement is held accountable. But that's not the way it is during the Trump administration. And I will just say, I'm going off to be with the frogs, and I can tell everybody at home that here in Washington, D.C., in the Senate office buildings, they are the hit of this period of time and tonight's proceedings. They are the hit.
That's great to hear. Well, we at People's Town Hall do not endorse elected officials. We don't endorse candidates, but we do endorse town halls, and nobody sets as high a standard of town hall availability as these two senators with us tonight, Senator Ron Wyden, Senator Jeff Merkley. Year after year, hold dozens of town halls around their state, from the smallest county to the biggest county, and we hope more of your colleagues follow your lead. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know we had hundreds and hundreds of folks who wanted to ask questions. We could not get to everyone, but you will have an opportunity to see them at Town Hall near you, I am sure.
Mine are this weekend, and let me thank Senator Merkley.
Absolutely. This was great. This was the Fate of the Nation broadcast, and we try to bring integrity to what's really gone on this last year and say this year is so important. So definitely, when people say, what can we do? Well, use your voice. Write to us, call us, demonstrate in the streets, demonstrate outside our offices. Let us know how concerned you are. Let everyone know in the administration how concerned you are. Get engaged in the campaigns that are coming up. In whatever viewpoint you might have, be engaged. We need engaged citizenry and democracy because we are on the verge of losing it if we don't act with passion, if we don't act with absolute engagement in the course of this year to come. Let's save our republic.
3 words, blow the whistle.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, Senators. See you soon.